Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
This is Eyewitness, ThePrint's daily live feature reporting the COVID pandemic across the country. Every day, India breaks its own global record with the highest number of COVID cases, as well as mortality figures. And perhaps nothing is worse than Delhi, which is the epicenter or one of the many epicenters of this COVID crisis. And I have with me Simran Sarur of ThePrint. She's at Jaipur Golden Hospital in Delhi, where 20 people have overnight lost their lives, ostensibly because of a lack of oxygen. Simran, can you hear me and can you tell me what's going on? You're at the Jaipur Golden Hospital. Tell me what's happening.
Hi, okay, so I'm standing outside the emergency of Jaipur Golden Hospital, which is in Rohini in Delhi. So around 20 people passed away last night because there was a lack of oxygen pressure. There was very little oxygen, very less volume of oxygen, which is what led to a drop in pressure, which is why a lot of patients who needed high flow oxygen were not able to sustain. So that is what happened last night. Right now, the emergency, it's been completely barricaded, so they're not allowing journalists to go inside or speak with anybody.
Okay.
A lot of the patients who passed away, their families have already come and collected their bodies. So that is what is happening right now.
Okay, so Simran, you've spoken to the hospital authorities.
Yes.
Tell me what they're saying. And viewers, this is just also to ask you to send in questions. Simran will answer each one of those to the best of her ability. So Simran, tell me what the hospital authorities told you.
Okay, so the hospital authorities, I spoke to the director, Dr. Baluja.
Yeah.
He said that what happened was that the oxygen, they've been allotted 3.6 metric tons of oxygen per day.
Okay.
This is supposed to come in every day. They have a contract with Inox, which is the supplier. They're supposed to come in every day at around 4 p.m. to deliver this oxygen. But what happened was the last delivery until today was day before yesterday at 5 p.m. At around 5 p.m. Yesterday, when they were supposed to get a refill of that oxygen, Dr. Baluja was specifically calling Inox. He said that nobody answered the phone. He realized something was amiss when he didn't get what is called a dispatch note, which is what is sent to the hospital every day when the oxygen is on the way to the hospital.
Yeah.
So he said, I got suspicious when that didn't come. I waited till about 6:37. There was no response. Finally, at around 12 at night, they managed to get some oxygen, but it was only 1.5 metric tons, which is about 40% of the requirement.
I see.
That lasted till the morning, and this morning as well, there was a lot of, it was just hour to hour, minute to minute. They managed to get the refill at around 2 p.m. But when I spoke to him around 2:30, he said that again, this is not enough. It's still 40% of our requirement. So there seems to be a huge shortage in the supply of oxygen.
So tell me, did you manage to speak to any of the relatives of the patients? And if you did, what did they say?
So I managed to speak to some of the patients, relatives of patients who are currently admitted. I was not able to speak to any of the families of patients who passed away last night. But one of the patients who is admitted currently is a woman. She's 36 years old. She's pregnant. She's in the ICU. Fortunately, her life was spared yesterday. But she was in dire need of oxygen, and the hospital had asked her husband, who I met outside today, to organize oxygen himself. So he was able to do that. He's not sure how long the oxygen will last. He was told by the hospital that, okay, now, the situation is under control. We can manage for a while, but he still doesn't know how long. And on the phone, Dr. Baluja again told me that whatever oxygen has been supplied is still not yet enough. So we don't know how long this will last. But what we do know is that the oxygen supply is definitely not ample. It's not enough for the 200 odd patients who are admitted here right now.
So Dr. Baluja is the superintendent. He is the director.
He's the medical director. He's the medical
director.
Yes.
So when the oxygen was running out in the hospital last night or early this morning, what happened? How do they break the news to the patients who whose masks have been fitted onto those cylinders?
So it seems that a lot of some families weren't actually told at the time. It seems that a lot of the news was broken to them through the news, in fact.
Through the
So
news, you mean the families only heard about
well,
the fact
this is what one family who was coming out said. But like I said, I was not able to directly speak to anybody. My colleague Suraj, who is in fact behind the camera right now holding it, he overheard this from a family member that was just coming out. So one family had said that they were not informed that this had happened, and they found out through the news.
So how did you ask the medical director, Dr. Baluja, that how did they break the news to the patients or to the relatives of the patients? What was the situation?
I did not have the opportunity to ask him that question at the time. But from what he told me, he said that they were utterly helpless. They were trying their best to try to actually organize the oxygen so as to avoid this kind of situation.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Simran, some people have sent in questions, and Abhinav has a question for you. He wants to know, he's saying, at a time when everybody is so anxious about what's going on, how do we spread awareness about whether the news is verified or not? In your reporting on the pandemic across the country over the last year, this is a question that must have been asked to you again and again as a reporter by patients, by their families in hospitals. And, is it how do you verify the news? How do ordinary people understand what's happening on the ground is real or not real?
So the best way that I have found to verify news like this is to get directly in touch with people like the medical director, who is aware of everything that is happening and going on, and who also at a point like this cannot deny that something like this has happened. It's such a desperate situation right now that there is it doesn't seem like anybody's trying to suppress anything or not come forward and just say that this is what the situation is, that there is a shortage of oxygen. So I think getting in touch with direct nodal officers, with people who are aware, with people who are in charge, that is the way to verify.
Pooja wants to know, Simran, whether, what your latest report is. Is it that 20 patients have died overnight? Are there more people who are perhaps in danger of losing their lives because of the oxygen shortage?
Yes. So,
I can see that behind you there is an ambulance that is coming out. The barricades have been moved out.
Yeah. So actually right now at Jaipur Golden Hospital, when I was speaking to the director, he said that, we do have a few beds that are inside. A few WhatsApp messages were also doing the rounds, showing empty beds inside the hospital. And he said, look, we are just not admitting more patients to fill up these beds because I cannot guarantee what will happen to them in 4 days' time if there is a shortage of oxygen. I don't want to give somebody false hope, admit them, and then have a tragedy like this happen all over again. So the reality of the oxygen shortage is very real. It is also, we've just come back from Fortis where there are also 90 patients on the ventilator. As soon as half an hour ago, their oxygen supply had not been replenished again by the same supplier, I know. So there seems to be a massive crunch. And just so Dr. Baluja had also said that had they not got the oxygen supply by 2 p.m. today, 200 patients were admitted here, it would have been really tragic.
So Varun had a question, which is, how is the situation at the hospital now? But I think you've answered the question. Varun, Simran has just told you that they have got oxygen for a few more hours. How many more hours, Simran, do they have the oxygen for?
So as far as I know, about 7 to 8 hours.
So another 7 to 8 hours. And Rashmi has a similar question, which is, do they have enough supply to take care of the remaining patients? So Rashmi, you have an answer from Simran, which is that they have about 7 to 8 hours of oxygen at Jaipur Golden. But Simran has been covering the situation in other hospitals in Delhi as well. Simran, you've just been to Fortis in Shalimar Bagh. What is the situation there?
So Fortis is also in a similar situation. Obviously, no patients have died yet. There has not been a catastrophe of that sort. but the doctors over there are very, very worried that something like this may happen if their oxygen supply is not replenished in time. So there are 90 patients on in critical care and ventilator over there who are in need of this oxygen and who haven't got it. And a similar story, I was speaking to the Dr. Panigrehi, who is in charge of operations at Fortis Healthcare, and he said the same thing, which was that they were supposed to get a particular allocation, and that was not met, and they got about I'm not sure what percentage exactly, but less than 50% of what they required. So again, at that hospital as well, it's minute to minute.
Right. A couple of other questions. Ashutosh Bagga wants to know, Simran, how are hospitals rationing their oxygen supply? Can you ration oxygen? I mean, can you sort of share, can people share masks or tubes, or how does that work?
I believe what can be done is this oxygen in one cylinder, multiple people can attach various masks. Like I believe in GTB hospital, there were 3 to 4 people with one cylinder. So that is how I think hospitals are managing. Over here, I was not allowed inside, so I don't know what the situation inside the hospital is, whether they are rationing it, how they are rationing it. But as I said earlier,
right,
some patients are being asked by their families to bring their own cylinders because the hospital cannot manage. So that is the situation over here.
Right. So Mohit Paramarsh Singh is asking, what's the update on the Oxygen Express as demanded by the Delhi government? Debraj Sarkar wants to know, is it true that the Delhi government doesn't have any oxygen transporting vehicles? Do you have that information, Simran, about what the government is planning to do, or what the government's needs are, what the latest situation is?
So I couldn't hear you properly, but if it's regarding the government's needs, the Delhi government has said that it needs around 700 metric tons of oxygen per day. The current quota is 480 metric tons, which is still not the requirement as claimed by the Delhi government. And right now in court, the Delhi government has said that they're not even getting the 480 metric tons. They're getting around 380 metric tons, which is 100 metric tons less than even the allocation. So, so this crisis is definitely taking a toll on patients over here.
And I think the Delhi High Court has also said, and this is a question that Debraj Sarkar had asked earlier, Simran. He wants to know about the Delhi High Court hearing today and what the government has said in response. And Debraj, I can only say that the Delhi High Court is really furious and deeply unhappy and upset about the way this is being handled or mishandled, and has said to the government that if anybody stops any oxygen tanker from traveling into Delhi, then he says, show us this man and we will hang him. So very strong words from the Delhi High Court. Simran, do you have any update from the Delhi government on how it's planning to handle this?
So the last that I heard before I actually started this live was about the allocations of that the Delhi government was still not getting its required quota of 480 metric tons. So that was the last I heard before I came live, and the rest of the time I've been on the field.
Right.
So I haven't had the opportunity to keep keep a close eye on what the High Court has said.
So Saravanan Kannan is saying, despite the Prime Minister's assurance, you know that yesterday when there was a meeting, Simran, where the PM met several officials, of course, in the government, senior people in the cabinet, as well as especially oxygen manufacturers, and basically sending the message that nobody should suffer from a lack of oxygen. And he said to all the states where he met, he had this virtual meeting with all the where he said that no oxygen tankers should be stopped in the wake of reports that Haryana was not allowing oxygen tankers to come to Delhi. Now, in the wake of the Prime Minister's assurance, why is it that oxygen is still such a concern in Delhi?
So I had spoken to one of the nodal officers in the Petroleum and Safety Explosive Organization, which is sort of overlooking the distribution and supply of oxygen. And he said that essentially, even though India produces enough oxygen and the demand can be met by that supply on paper, technically speaking, the issue is of transport. So there aren't enough cryogenic tanks, which is what carries oxygen coming into Delhi, and there's a shortage of supply in this region. Whereas in the east, Odisha and states over there, there is enough supply, but we're not able to bring it here in time. So that is one issue. That is one reason why we're facing this crunch right now.
And Abhinav Sharma has another question where he's asking, in this hospital in Jaipur Golden, are there many people who are old, possibly comorbid or compromised, whose immunity is compromised for other reasons, for other factors? So he wants to know what their situation is.
So I believe so. Right now they have closed their OPD until Monday. I don't know if there are plans to open it after that, but as of now, it seems that the patients here are in critical care in COVID. Although there are patients still coming for dialysis and those basic needs, but the OPD is absolutely shut right now.
Right. Anurag Singh has a question for you, Simran, where he says, are the doctors sometimes put in a situation where they have to choose, to give an oxygen mask to one patient or the other?
I think the best person to ask a question like that to is a doctor. Right now,
when you've spoken to doctors, what do they say to you? Have you asked them this ever? Do you choose between patients, between lives of people? Somebody who
right now at Jaipur Hospital, there were no doctors available to speak.
But in your experience covering the pandemic, you were one of the first last year when the pandemic broke. You were amongst ThePrint's first reporters who went on the ground. You were in Gujarat. And over this last year, when you've been across the country, meeting people, doctors, what is your experience? What do doctors say?
So in my experience, and what doctors often say is that they have to make the difficult choice to refuse patients when they're at capacity, when they're doing everything they can, and that in itself is a very difficult choice, because then patients are left going from one hospital to another. Doctors are very aware of that situation. They don't want it to happen to anybody, but that is the difficult choice that they have to make, which is refuse patients.
And Yash is asking, have you had the chance to visit hospitals at night, not just in Delhi, but elsewhere in the country? Do you feel that you find people lying on the floor without assistance?
Sorry, Jyoti, I can't hear you. Your
so
voice
Yash had a question for you where he's saying, have you had the chance to go to hospitals at night, not just in Delhi, but elsewhere in the country as well? And what do you find at night? Is the situation worse at night than during the day?
I have not been to any of the hospitals in the last week at night because I was out of town. I was covering the cruise.
But elsewhere in the country over the last several months,
it seems so things do get worse at night because there are more. Right now, there's a night curfew as well in Delhi. There's a regular curfew. It's difficult to get around. So it does seem like things do get worse at night.
So I'm going to let you go, Simran. Thank you so much for describing the situation not just at the Jaipur Golden Hospital, where unfortunately 20 people lost their lives overnight, but across Delhi, the situation in Delhi, the horrific situation where people are still struggling for breath, for oxygen. And thank you so much, viewers. This was Eyewitness. Every day around 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening, we will bring to you one of ThePrint's reporters covering the COVID pandemic on the ground. So stay tuned. We will send you an update, and thank you so much for watching. Simran, thank you so much for your time, and also to Suraj, thank you again.
Thanks, Jyoti.